Welcome, everybody. I always started a year late. We'll give everybody a couple seconds, moments to jump in before we get started. All right. Just a bit of housekeeping while people are logging on. And thank you to Celeste, who's modeling this for us. We're going to be using we will have a thought exchange at the end of towards the end of our town hall. But you can feel free to submit questions via the Q&A tool. And you can upvote questions. Just if you see one that's already been posed that you would like to ask as well, you can just hit the thumbs up, and that'll help us identify the most popular or our FAQs, so we can make sure that we address what's on the top of most people's minds.
All right, Patrick, are we ready?
Let's do it. I'll share my screen.
Thank you for driving, Patrick. All right, welcome everybody for our elementary town hall session. We have about an hour set aside this afternoon to review some general facts about our path towards reopening, but our intention is to leave a good amount of time for Q&A. Patrick's already explained the process for getting questions asked and prioritized, so please follow that. Patrick, go ahead, next slide. So tonight we're going to provide updates on county guidance. We're going to review the reopening document and checklist, what we're now calling our dashboard. We're going to discuss some instructional considerations and then spend some time looking at our planning process and next steps. Next slide, Patrick. So this slide is actually provided for you, not so much so that I can read it, but there's a whole bunch of good links here related to information regarding the county's guidance for reopening. And so you can see that we've gone through the purple tier, red tier. We're in the orange tier right now, and we are currently in the guidance documents from ACOE and the County Health Department on version 17. It tends to change every week as new data comes in. We did, at the last board meeting, the board approved our reopening document and checklist, which was submitted to ACOE on November 5th, speaking to a January 4th return of our elementary school students. The health department did update some guidelines regarding reopening of secondary schools, which districts were permitted to start reopening after November 9th. That's not the focus. I just thought it would be good for y'all to have that information. Next slide, Patrick. So there are two documents. One is our reopening plan document that was submitted to the county. Patrick, if you could click on that just real quickly so people can see where it lives, if they want to return to it later on. It's on the district's website. But you'll note that it's put together in a flipbook format. And Patrick, just click through a couple of slides. We're going to talk about a lot of this. I just wanted you to be able to see what that document looks like that was submitted to the county. So that's that document. And then we have another document that we're kind of unveiling this afternoon, and that's our district dashboard. So Patrick, you can click back out of that and let's click on the dashboard so that people can see what that looks like. The dashboard is designed to address the priority areas that the county has asked us to tend to. They're written in narrative form in that reopening plan document that we were just looking at. And then there's a checklist that the county asked that we submit. We refine that checklist so that we can have progress indicators on our dashboard. So this document this dashboard relates to the other document and to the county's checklist, but has more specific information. And if you look at the icons, you'll see a couple of them that I think are important. A plus mark indicates an area that we're going beyond in terms of adherence to the county guidance. And then you'll see a little chain link. And the chain link one I think is incredibly important as we communicate to our families that these are areas that we can give direction and guidance on, but we really need families, parents specifically, to pay attention to if we're going to be able to stay back at school. We got to keep people safe. So we need help in these areas. So Patrick, you can click back out of that. If you download this PowerPoint, which we'll provide to you, those links are live in the document, but they're also available by just clicking on the district's website. And I think now we're going to turn it over to Ed.
Thank you, Dr. Haglin. Good afternoon, everybody. So regarding that reopening plan and the dashboard that Dr. Haglin just reviewed, I wanted to go over a couple of areas that are part of that reopening plan in the next couple of slides. So for this slide, we are required to have a district COVID-19 liaison. And so we've identified 3 people in the district who will be the district liaisons, and they will be the point people for the county. And so that's going to be Kathleen Reif, who's our Director of Student Services, Leslie Heller, our Coordinator of Student Services, and then myself. So the 3 of us are the designated district COVID liaisons that will communicate directly to the county should there be a positive case or any questions that we have in need of the county's assistance. Each school site also has a COVID-19 liaison. And so we've identified 2 people from each school site who will be the point people for the sites to communicate directly to one of the district liaisons. So the flow of communication will be, if there's an issue or a question at the school site, it will go to the school site liaison, then it will go to the district liaison, who will then communicate with the county. The other area that we wanted to bring your attention to has to do with the monthly COVID testing that's now going to be available to school staff. I should say all district staff, not just school staff, but all district staff. And so we're in the process right now of really looking at the logistics of how that's going to work. But essentially it will be testing opportunities that will be available to all staff. And the recommendation from the county is to provide the testing 1 time per month for all employees. So as I mentioned, we're still kind of looking at the logistics of that, how that's going to work. We're thinking about a centralized location to provide that testing, and then working with the Curative Labs is the company that we're trying to get a contract with, and we'll bring that contract to the board on the November 12th board meeting for review and for possible approval. So more information coming regarding testing. And so again, we're working on the logistics if we get the board to approve the contract. Next page, Patrick. Okay, one other area in the reopening plan is to review the guidelines set forth by the Alameda County Public Health Department regarding the specific steps that we would take as a school district in regards to when a staff or a student is ill. And more specifically, if a staff or a student were to be diagnosed with COVID-19 as a positive case, we have to follow specific procedures. And so the 6 main scenarios that are explained in the document that's linked here, it's now in version 17. It's the COVID-19 School Guidance Alameda County School Reopening Plans. You can open that link, and on page 31 to 35 are the specific scenarios that we will follow should there be a specific case. So you can read for yourself here the 6 scenarios, but they go from, is there a student or a staff member who may have symptoms, answered yes on the health screening, or have a temperature of 100 or above? What are the action steps that need to happen should that occur? And what's the communication that should happen should that occur? And like I said, it's all listed in that guidance. I won't go through it with all of you tonight, but these are the 6 scenarios. So symptoms, is there somebody in the household who may have COVID-19? What do we do if there's a positive case, staff or student? What if a student or staff member is isolated because they have symptoms, but they had a test and the test was negative? What do we do with that? What if somebody wants to return before the isolation period is over, that 10-day period for isolation? What are the steps and action and communications that we do with that particular situation? So hopefully you have a chance to review that information in the document. And so, like I said, when a situation should occur, then we will follow the guidelines from Alameda County Public Health. That's Patrick. And then lastly, this is the website. It contains the Alameda County Public Health Department dashboard. There's information here. It's almost real time. It's from probably about a few days back, or they take an average of the cases, a 7-day average. So it's a little bit delayed by about a week, but you can get up-to-date information, as up-to-date as it can be, from the Public Health Department regarding specific metrics that the County Public Health Department is using to measure our COVID-19 positivity rate, also our case rate, and then our positivity rate in areas of the county that are lower socioeconomic status. So all of these metrics help the county to determine what the current tier status will be for the county. And as of today, I took the snapshot here on the right-hand side of this slide. We are in tier status number 3, which is the orange tier that Dr. Haglund alluded to earlier. And you could see the metrics there as to why we're in the orange tier. So this is a reference for all of you, should you be interested in knowing what the metrics are. Okay, I think that's it for me at this time. And I'm going to turn it over to our Assistant Superintendent of Business Services, Ahmed Sheikh Holaslami.
Thank you, Ed, and good afternoon to our staff. Keep this high level. The district, we've been working for a long time on our personal protective equipment. And when staff return to the sites, they will be provided cloth masks and face shields. And additionally, depending on your classification, there might be additional type of PPE that you would receive, such as gowns, gloves, shoe covers, and so on. We do have cloth masks for our students as well, 2 pairs. And any student or staff member that does forget their mask, we will have quantities of disposable face masks available as well. We have been working on, making sure our soaps are filled. Lots of hand sanitizers have been purchased, either the gallon type that you squeeze or the types on the walls, and those are being dispersed within the common areas of our schools. Each school does have a PPE coordinator, and those coordinators talk directly to our purchasing and warehouse team. And we have set up a method by which through a Google form, additional PPE can be requested. Next slide. In terms of our daily cleaning routines, our staff have been cleaning our sites regularly currently for our programs, and those cleaning schedules will continue. High touch points throughout the schools will be cleaned on a daily basis, including obviously the bathrooms and common areas. In the classrooms, this is where it gets a little bit more in the detail. We are asking staff to keep their the desks and the hard surfaces clear so our staff can do the cleaning efficiently during cohort changes, which at the elementary schools will happen during that lunch break period. And so this would be an example of a classroom where certain, let's say the AM is where our morning classes sit, and then the afternoon would be in blue. And the critical thing is that the distances between the students and to the teacher be between that 5 to 6 foot. That will help, again, the transmission issues around COVID that are guidelines, but also will help with the cleaning on a daily basis of all the hard surfaces, as we have to move quickly through the classrooms to do the cleaning. So we, again, ask everyone to keep their areas very tight in terms of the loose items. Additionally, we're asking that communal sitting areas and bean bags, kind of those areas be off limits. Again, cleaning is very difficult around those. Next slide, please. This is an area we have invested a lot of time and resources. Currently, our teams have gone through every school, elementary, middle school, and high schools, and adjusted the units to ensure maximum fresh air intake. Where possible, we are advising doors and windows to be open to allow fresh air movement. We know that's going to become more challenging as the weather cools. And so we are in the process of updating and replacing all of the filters with the recommended MERV 13. 90% of our elementary schools are complete, and the rest of them will be done soon. Additionally, our systems have been programmed so that they're continuously moving air, and so that does create some noise, but that again is part of the recommendations. Going above and beyond, we're in the process of purchasing and procuring more HEPA air purifiers. We've already deployed about 100 of them throughout the district for our current programs that are in place. But we will be placing a large order in to ensure that each classroom has units in. Additionally, we've looked at other technologies out there that improve air quality and reduce the potential for the coronavirus particles. And so we are looking at the district office and school office spaces to receive what is called a needlepoint bipolar ionization system. And that will work well for those spaces. Next slide. In terms of child nutrition, the program will change once we go in hybrid mode in January. At the 9 elementary campuses, we'll continue the drive-through, and at the middle schools, the 2 middle schools that we currently have, that will end. All AM and middle school and students in distance learning and high school can pick up their meals at the drive-throughs at the elementary campuses. And for the middle school students, for the afternoon students, they'll arrive prior to lunch and be able to pick up their lunch at school and sit down before their classes start. So a little change in our program. However, the program will remain free to all community members under the age of 18, and they can continue accessing the meals at our elementary sites. Next slide. Our technology team, working closely with teaching and learning and our site techs and integration specialists, have looked at what additional technology support will be needed in the hybrid mode. And I'm happy to kind of announce that we're going to have an opportunity for staff to acquire that additional technology. based on their needs. And that program will be rolled out very soon by our technology and teaching and learning team. Additionally, our buses have been running for the past month to transport our special ed students, and that program will expand as our students return in hybrid mode. So that's it for the operational side. At this time, I'll turn it over to Dr. Woodward.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Let's go back in time to 4 months ago when parents completed the intent forms that for their students that selected either hybrid, at home, or long-term independent study. In July at the elementary level, you'll see that there were 88% that selected hybrid and 12% that selected at home. It became very clear to us that it was necessary to have parents do another recommitment as we are in COVID. We've been in COVID now since July for at least 4 months, and it became clear that some parents had changed their minds. So as you can see, the parent choice data has changed by a 26 percentage point decrease for hybrid and a 26 percentage point increase for families that would keep their students home for the rest of the year. Next slide, please. So the variance in the most recent parent choice data impacts the elementary program. In August, based upon parent choice data, at-home students were placed strategically in select classes with cohorts, while the majority of students were hybrid only, or majority of classes were hybrid only. As you can see at this point in November, and as you have probably also seen on the information that principals have shared with you, there are now at-home students in nearly every classroom. This requires us to think differently about how we will approach the instructional models at each elementary school site. And there's also nuances in the data that showed up differently at every site and in every classroom, making it hard to do a one-size-fits-all program every place. So this does require some decisions regarding the instructional models that will be used to be made at the site level with input from staff. In order to accommodate recent parent choice, some class changes will be necessary, and grade level teams with principal input will determine the instructional models within the board adopted AM/PM schedule. Next slide. So this slide takes us to some of the elementary logistics. While the number of minutes for in-school learning will be consistent from site to site, the amount of time between cleaning for AM/PM sessions will also be relatively consistent, as Ahmad spoke, because we do need to ensure that there's proper cleaning in between groups. Remembering that students would be coming in on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, with Wednesday being the remote learning day with a synchronous check-in. So at the site level, the teachers do have, and I know that there's been some engaging conversation going on, innovative ideas as to how they can keep their own students and do maybe platooning or team teaching at schools where there are abundance of at-home learners. Entire remote learning classes may be formed, causing some shuffling of students between teachers. And other sites with fewer at-home learners might opt to engage in concurrent or blended instruction and in either the AM or the PM sessions. The input of our teachers working with their site leaders to craft these plans started last week and continue this week is key to this process. And sites will be submitting their final plans by November 30th. So this is a simple timeline, and as you can imagine, there is much to do before we reopen in January. So some of the planning you can see has already occurred, and this week, which is highlighted by the yellow arrows, we as a district and your site leaders will continue to seek your input, as well as input from our community, which will occur tomorrow night at a town hall meeting at 5:30. Next week, you will hold virtual parent-teacher conferences as planned, and site plans will be completed by Monday, November the 30th. And then in early December, sites will notify families as to placement in either AM or PM sessions, and will let families know if class changes will be made. And then that would be followed by a final week of remote learning before winter break. And then health and guidance remaining stable. We look forward to welcoming our students back on our campuses on January 4th, sorry. getting a few months ahead there. And now I'll go ahead and pass to Mr. Michael Williams, Director of Human Resources.
So a lot of what I want to highlight is we are currently either meeting with or navigating through communications with both bargaining units as of right now. Our biggest focus during our sessions have been highlighted as it relates to the Alameda County Department of Health guidelines and the personal protective equipment that will be issued for staff. So as the county guidelines continue to change, we are continuing to work with the different leadership groups within the different unions to discuss what's appropriate while following our PPE equipment needs. As of right now, we do not have another date scheduled with APT, but we are collaborating with them, but still looking forward to settling on another date where we can come to the table. And currently with CSEA, we have 2 dates already scheduled, one being the 17th and the other being December 8th. Next slide, please, Patrick. So as you can see here, just for your reference, here's the 2 current MOUs that we already have negotiated and settled on. The highlights of both MOUs, APT, which was signed on August 12th. It talks about what full remote looks like, partial return, and what full return looks like. Again, as I mentioned before, the safety, mitigation, and PPE guidelines are highlighted there, along with a 10-day notice for staff to return to campus. CSCA, again, similar to APT, focused on safety mitigation, PPE, and recall to work, which for CSCA is just 48-hour notification. Next slide, please. So one of the things as we're reporting to back, if there is any challenges with reporting to back for any staff members, there is an interactive process. So if a staff member is requesting leave, we have an informed K-12 document that they would complete that requires a leave that would be accompanied with a doctor's note for the purpose of the leave. There would be an interactive process where our human resources department member would meet with you, talk about what accommodations you are requesting as it relates to the doctor's note. And then depending on what that looks like, it would depend on what leave falls in place. FMLA or any other leaves that are appropriate for the current circumstance that you would fall under, we would look into and make sure we're appropriately accommodating you the best we possibly can. And I think the slide goes back to David.
Thank you, Mike. So there are still some factors at play out there that we want you to be aware of, including some that I notice have already come up in the chat. And so hopefully we can deal with some of the questions by dealing with a few of these little issues. Number one, the COVID data trends, they're going to continue to go up and down. We don't know where they're going to go. There's some speculation that there may be boosts after holidays, but we don't know that to be true. It doesn't really matter what we think. It matters what the public health department tells us. And so we continue to look at the data trends. Ed is our district liaison. He communicates with the public health department regularly. Likewise, I'm on a call with the public health director once, sometimes twice a week to get guidance. And they're very forthcoming with the data. And they do give us some pretty good advice in terms of how to be safe or mitigate any kind of risk associated with the virus as we begin to bring people back together. But want to be really, really clear. If the data says don't open, we will not be opening. So just keep that in mind. We need to plan as though we are and be ready to, but everybody needs to understand that we still consider the safety of our staff and our students to be paramount in this decision-making process. But we can't stall the planning process just because of the unknowns. We have to keep marching forward with confidence that we will adhere to the safety data as we get closer to the date. So please rest assured about that. Janelle already talked about the school-specific schedules being developed by the principals in collaboration with the school site staff. Principals have also been talking with parents, and surveys have been done at the site level. Um, I've said this in other venues. I'll say it again now as much as possible. I believe that the best decisions, instructional decisions, are made closest to the students. And so I'm very, very supportive of this idea of giving the sites and the principals the flexibility to come up with a strategy that works best for their teams. And those teams include parents and students. So we really are relying on the principals to take leadership in that area, and they're stepping up to the plate and doing a great job with that. And so I strongly encourage you to be talking to your site principals and with the leadership team at the school sites as this planning process goes forward. There's also issues relating to procurement and deployment of professional development. Relating to any new technologies that we bring in, we have to be able to provide that opportunity for teachers to learn, because teachers are having to teach with new tools. And that means there's stuff that they need to be confident with those tools. And the way to do that is to get professional development in front of them. And so we need to be able to do that. Procuring, deploying PD related to other risk mitigation strategies, whether it's the hand washing or the pathways onto and out of campus, all those different things that we're engaging to try to minimize any kind of risk at the school sites. There's professional development that needs to be implemented. In that case, it doesn't just relate to teachers and classified staff. There's some PD, so to speak, that needs to be done with parents as well. We need to teach them what the new behaviors and expectations are. We have ongoing negotiations with our labor unions, as Mike talked about. Those are mid-process, we're not done. So some of the questions in the Q&A we won't be able to attack just because they're subjects of negotiation at this particular point in time. The processing of potential leave requests that Mike already talked about, and the sufficiency of substitutes is another big issue. Mike didn't say it, I wanna make sure that we do. That when we look at an interactive process and look at accommodations, one of the potential accommodations that could be arising out of this type of a situation is individuals who can be accommodated to work if they're able to work remotely from home. But that interactive process is the process by law that we have to engage in order to get to those conclusions. So I've had a few teachers write me and saying, well, are we still going to be able to work remotely if we have health issues at home? The answer to that question is that would be our goal. There's got to be a need. We have to be able to sustain the number of employees that are requesting that, and that's related to the number of families that are requesting it. But our goal is to work with each of our employees and try to make sure that both students and staff get into the position that's going to be most beneficial to them. So with that, Patrick, I think we're on our questions slide. We do have a number of questions that have come up in the Q&A, and I'm happy to read through them, the ranked ones first, and then various staff members will be able to answer the questions as we go through that. So the first question, and I'm not going to read statements just so that we're clear. Statements are not questions, so I'm only focused on the questions so we can get through as many as possible. Livermore is recommending a return 2 weeks after the new year due to travel and quarantine. Will PUSD consider this? Ed, I'd like for you to speak to the travel issue from the guidance from the county and state.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I want to start by answering this question that things change at any time. I think all of you know that, but I do want to say that. So at this current time, the state and the county are not recommending a quarantine of any sort for state travel or international travel. So given that guidance, PUSD will also follow the non-quarantine requirement for any travel. With that said, there is a recommendation of a 14-day quarantine for those who do choose to travel, and that goes for students and staff. So I'd like to answer that question, David, by saying it is not a requirement, but a recommendation of a 14-day quarantine should any student or staff member travel.
Yes, and it's self-quarantine, so it's not a quarantine that's directed by the health department or by the district.
Correct, self-quarantine for the 14 days, again, for families and for staff.
And since not every family is going to travel, it wouldn't make sense to require everybody to be on a quarantine of 2 weeks, even if another district thinks that's the right thing to do. All right, next question. What is the reason why TK through 5 teachers must teach back at school sites starting on the 30th of November? Mike, you want to take that one?
Sure. So the thought process behind that, and as David alluded to, some of the things I won't be able to fully address as that's part of negotiations. So we're working closely with the APT leadership on that. But essentially, it's the idea of that transitional planning, so that when January 4th comes along, everyone understands where the entrance and exit point, ingress, egress points are on the campus, what it looks like on your campus, because I think all of us know it's not going to look the exact same as when we left on March 16th. So it's a way to be able to get used to that new environment in which you'll be navigating through on January 4th. So that's essentially the idea behind it. Part of what's highlighted in the August MOU was also providing at least 10 days notice for that transition. So within those 10 days, we also have to provide 3 days for preparing. So we are looking at trying to provide as much time as possible and notification as possible for that transition and preparing for a January 4th return for students.
And there has been some updated guidance today from the Public Health Department about travel, and we'll be sending that out both to our staff, but also to families, asking them to adhere to the guidance from the county. All right, let's see. Have parents been informed about how academic, instructional, and asynchronous time will be different when we return either in hybrid or remote form? So I'm going to take a stab at it, Janelle, and then you can jump in there just because there's something I want to say. So in my communications to parents, I have said that explicitly, that the instructional program will not look the same as it has since the beginning of the school year. And I will continue to remind parents of that in my communications with them, because there's just no way that it can be the same amount of time that they've gotten used to in the full remote environment. Janelle?
Thank you, Dr. Haglund. In addition, at the board meetings, we have also alluded to that fact, and tomorrow night at the community town hall, I will be speaking to that issue.
Okey doke.
And we'll continue to inform families as we near closer as to what the expectations would be.
Okay, Celeste, there's another question in there about teachers with medical concerns and why isn't PUSD giving that choice to teachers? I think I already addressed that. That's a part of the interactive process. So we would encourage anybody that has that particular issue to go ahead and connect up with Nancy and HR to start that conversation. Okay, where are the written policy procedures around students using a restroom, recess, desk spacing, teachers eating lunch, etc.? Ed.
Sorry, David, can you repeat that?
Where are the written procedures around students using a restroom, recess, desk spacing, teachers eating lunch, etc.?
Oh, I see. So in the reopening plan, we have a section that indicates that we would sort of map out the schools regarding those specific areas. However, we have a risk mitigation committee that was put together as district office staff that will work with the principals specifically for their school sites to map out those specific areas that you just mentioned. So I would recommend that staff who are interested in knowing where that is, and that should be everybody, teachers could talk to their principals, and then principals can provide that plan specific to their school sites. But the principals are getting assistance from this risk mitigation team that is supposed to map out the school site. So Janelle, I don't know if you need to add any more to that, or Ahmed, but hopefully I answered that question.
I can add in a little bit and then maybe we'll turn it over to Ahmed. So a lot of this has already been taken care of with the small cohort supervision. So we've learned a great deal about just the flow on the campus. And as we near closer to reopening, more specific plans will be created, and that will include professional development for all folks, including the egress, the ingress, some of these details that were mentioned in the question. And that will be made very explicitly clear. And this will also need to be communicated with families and posted to websites. And so, Ahmed, I will turn the rest over to you.
No, that was great. Those were all the points that I was going to hit. Is that the risk mitigation team, which is a district, multi-departmental group, is supporting the site PPE coordinators, which are typically the vice principals and the principals, to help out with the detailed mapping out of the schools and some of the logistics that are mentioned in that question. So those plans should be ready for them when they return.
All right, thank you. Mike, here's one for you. Do we have to use our own sick days for quarantine?
Well, there is currently, there is some extended leave that was provided by the governor that I believe went into place right when we first went into COVID, where there's 80 hours, 10 working days provided that would be used prior to having to tap into that. For some of you, it's a cap at over, it covers about 2/3 of what your leave would be per day. So there is a process that we did communicate where you could use some of your sick time to make sure that there was full compensation for the time that you need to take out. But if you have already exhausted that time, yes, you would be having to use your additional sick days for quarantining.
Okay, thank you. All right, this is a short question, but lots of comments. So I'm going to read the question, see if we can get to it. Are you planning to restrict employees from traveling during break? And the answer to that is no. We're not going to restrict anybody's travel. That's, you have personal rights to do what you would like to be able to do. We will be providing you with the guidance from the county. And you'll note that the guidance in the county has some specific instructions for people who choose to travel and or choose to gather, even with groups of family members. And so we'll try to get that out to you soon so you can read through that at your leisure. And as I said, we'll also be providing that to families. Next question. I already talked to that one. Shoot. How is the DO going to support teachers who may have to teach live students at the same time as remote learners? Well, we have cameras installed and microphones available to enable our remote learners to follow the teacher. And will this be ready to go before, I think that's supposed to be January 4th, 2021. Dr. Woodward.
Yes, thank you. That is such a great question. And we've actually been working on that quite a bit. And we have done, especially with our integration specialists, they have been helping us greatly to test out some of this equipment, including Mr. Yee, who is our coordinator of innovation and distance learning. So we are looking into various devices that will assist with this, if this is the model that the teachers and the sites choose to use. And that would include the cameras that could be turned off at the teacher's discretion, and microphones that would be available to assist the remote learners to follow the teachers. And so Ahmad, if you want to talk a little bit about the timeline for ordering these devices and anticipated dates of arrival. We also realize that there will be a need for professional development with these new tools, just as Dr. Haglund mentioned. And so as we're crafting our plans for our upcoming professional development, we are thinking this through to be incorporated.
All right, Janelle, you're still up. How can teachers be expected to plan for 150 to 225 minutes of asynchronous work for remote students when they're teaching hybrid students all day?
I guess I would just have to answer that some of the professional development that we will provide would include taking the same lessons And then to some extent, there would be a need for some, I understand that teaching in person is not the same as teaching remote, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're on Zoom with the students in the afternoon for that full 2.5 hour block of time or whatever it may be. It just simply means that you're taking your lessons and then you are finding ways to be able to restructure that so it could meet the needs of your remote learners. I realize that that is more time consuming. And so part of the professional development that we will offer will include ways to make that a little bit easier for you.
All right. Did PUSD consider that they're sending us back to work soon after family gatherings when there is an expected uptick in cases? So I'll answer that one. And then Ed, if you want to jump in there, you can. Yes, we had those conversations. In fact, we had those conversations with the health department, and we put the date that we were intending, that the board approved returning in our plan, which was subsequently submitted and approved by the health department. So the short answer is yes, we did talk about that. Another piece to the question is about the uptick in cases. Although one might assume that that will occur, we don't know that that will. The other thing is that upticks in cases occur with or without holidays. There's been an uptick in cases this past week. And what I've told you already so far this afternoon, if we're having, if the data is turning bad, we will not be opening. So we will be paying attention to the data all throughout this process. All right, next question. We're required to teach on campus. Are we required to teach on campus if we have all of our hybrid students in the AM and are remote in the PM? A safe choice appears to eliminate the amount of bodies on campus and allow teachers to teach from home if they wish. I'm not completely understanding that question. It almost sounds like they're wondering if teachers could teach when they need to be on campus in the morning, but then go home for the remote stuff in the afternoon. That's not something I've heard presented before. Janelle, do you want to touch on that?
Sure, and I would imagine that Mr. Williams might want to weigh in as well. But this is when the decision was made to bring everybody back, it was made with the intention of everybody working from their classrooms. I do know that there could be some accommodations that would be made if there is the interactive process that could be adhered to. And so, Mike, maybe you can add a little bit of clarity as to what that might look like.
Yeah, thank you. As of now, everyone preschool through fifth is going to be required to be back on campus working with the students and working from their classroom. If there is a need to work in a remote environment, there will have to go through the interactive process. And based on that interactive process, we'll look at the accommodations that are needed and make the appropriate determination based on that. But as of when we start returning to campus, everyone is expected to be physically on campus, supporting kids from campus, whether you have students there or you're still teaching remotely.
Thank you, Mike. Next question, has Ahmad or management been in any classrooms and attempted to keep a 5-foot distance? Ahmad.
Yes, we've actually, went into classrooms and set them up with the 5 to 6 foot distance. We know that for some of our classrooms that have a lot of furniture, it's sometimes a little bit more challenging, but we know that in terms of spacing, to get the 12 to 16 students plus a teacher is doable. But we do understand that it's not going to be your typical teaching and not going to be your typical way of doing it because, of maintaining those distances. And I believe the hybrid model is also, the hour and time that we're in class is also different. So nothing is going to be like it was, but we know that physically we can accomplish those guidelines that they've set in the documents.
Okay, Janelle, I'm going to combine it with another question that's a little bit further down the list, but it's related to the same issue. If students are required to remain 5 to 6 foot apart, and then they're expected to sit at their desk for 2.5 hours with no breaks or movement, is that true?
No, there can be movement, and there can be movement outside as well on the campus. We need to be very strategic to ensure that there is no overlap and contact between different cohorts. But that is not to say that the students can't go outside. That is not to say that they can't engage in some activities aside from playground equipment. And it is not to say that students will have some free time in their classroom in which they can engage in alternative activities. So it doesn't need to be sitting at the desk learning for that entire amount of time in the academics. We also expect that there will be a good amount of time placed on the social emotional learning, and because that is, our students have been working in isolation, and so we realize that that will be important too.
All right, thank you. If students need to be moved to another class, will the district be providing a letter to these parents? I feel that this information needs to come from the DO.
Want me to take that, David?
I can take it too.
Janelle, why don't you take that?
Okay. So we are working with our site principals in order to craft some consistent communication that can be sent out. As Dr. Haglund mentioned, we are front loading this conversation with our families, letting them know that it is very likely there will be shifts in students that will need to be moved to other classrooms, depending upon the model. So we're getting ahead of some of that, but the letters themselves would come from the sites because that will include the specific information that parents would need to know about in terms of what session are the students in? Are they in an AM and PM class? Are they in the all remote class? And if there is a shift, they would need to know the teachers whose class they were leaving and then the name of the teacher whose class they would be arriving in. So there's some very site-specific information that would need to be incorporated in that letter, but we could get out in front of it by letting parents know that they would be receiving letters if their child would be moving to a different classroom.
All right, thank you. Livermore has said they'll consider hybrid once 67% of their families say they want to return. Has Pleasanton thought about that? It would make sense to me that we're aligned with our neighboring districts.
If I could just jump in on that, Dr. Haglund, you can add on if you'd like. I believe that Livermore's plans are in the emerging stage right now, and they have not surveyed their parents yet, to my knowledge. And so I don't know where the number 67% comes. It looks like, according to the data I was able to extract today, it looks like we're at a number that is around there, a little bit lower. So I can't really speak to what Livermore is doing. I also just want to say that even though we may have or hear of other plans that seem very tight and very well coordinated, I think in the past 6 to 7 months, we've all seen that there are adjustments that get made to every single plan that are based just upon the sheer logistics and the ability to actually implement the things that we think we're going to be able to implement. So we see that with the changing COVID data. We see that in some of the adjustments that we've had to make already. And I would expect that that would be true for other districts.
All right, thank you. So who is supposed to sanitize the classroom for the 90 minutes in between groups? Will you be increasing custodial staff to do this? Ahmad.
Great question. So our plan is to use our custodial team to clean during that lunch period, and we're going to do a variety of things to have them focus in on that change of cohorts that's occurring in the classrooms. And so that's looking at the bathrooms, doing potentially if facilities are available, an AM, PM model for the bathrooms, or cleaning the bathrooms before the lunch period, or to help us out in the time we have. And then the custodial staff will concentrate on the high touch points in the classrooms. And that's why the seating chart program is really critical, is the seats get assigned to their places so that we can, again, do the disinfection once a day in those areas and then hit the other high touch points. And if additional staff are needed, depending on the school sites and the number of classes that are back, then we will look at additional staffing to help support our custodials during that lunch period.
Okay, why would we even risk one case of COVID in our schools when we can finish the year out safely and likely come back vaccinated next year? Ed, you want to take that one?
Sure, I'll give it a shot. Hopefully others can chime in. So I think our philosophy has been to mitigate the risk as best as we can. So we're going through the checklist from the Public Health Department to make sure that we have the components in place that will help mitigate that risk. You know, I don't think there's ever going to be 100%, you know, non-risk school or district. So that's what we're trying to do here, is explain to the community what we've done in order to help support our staff and our students upon their return by providing and implementing the procedures, looking at the PPEs required, the social distancing, cohorting, and so forth. So, and I haven't heard anything about vaccines recently, having, you know, the timeline for vaccines. So,
Well, the virus is one of the risks that we're facing right now. But Ed, can you speak to the issue of mental health, wellness, and isolation?
yeah, I think when we first closed our schools in those early board meetings, I talked a lot about social emotional health, mental health, and what resources we're going to have available to our students and to our staff. And again, that was way back in March, April, and then throughout the summer and even to now. So we totally understand, and we're not alone. The state and the county and the nation totally understands how mental health is impacted by the student isolation, the people isolation, frankly, of what we need to do. So we're trying our best to make sure that those are also being addressed, in terms of those needs, I should say, are also being addressed, and providing as many resources to the community and to our staff. One of the other things too, in terms of curriculum, is working with our counselors and the teaching and learning department to implement and make sure that we have the SEL, social emotional learning curriculum, in place upon students returning, but also in remote. How that's going, I don't have the data for that, but I know that is a goal that we wanted to make sure that the social emotional curriculum and the social emotional needs are addressed. So we have resources, we have companies, Care Solace being one of them, that has helped us as sort of a concierge to assist our staff and community to access mental health services. But hopefully I answered your question, David, that we have focused on that as a big part of our area of need while kids were in remote learning.
Yeah, I just think it's important for us to realize that there is risk associated with the virus, but there's also risk with kids being isolated and at home, and we need to think about the whole picture for the student. So we're at our time, but we have one more activity that we want to do with you. So I'm going to turn it back over to Patrick to go to the next slide, and I'm going to ask two things. Pam, if you'll step into this activity for us, I'd appreciate it. And then Patrick, if you'll make sure that you download all of the remaining questions so that we can address them after our town hall meeting.
Thank you, Dr. Haglund. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Woodward to explain this activity.
Okay, thank you. So we wanted to have a variety of ways that you can provide input. And we've done the Q&A, and you've also been able to rate those questions, as we can see, and we'll continue to work on getting those answered. The other thing that we wanted to do was to engage in our Thought Exchange, which is a crowdsourcing platform, to learn more about your thinking at this time. So our question today is, what comes to mind for you as you think about schools reopening? And we'd like you to take a moment to reflect on this question. And then you can use the QR code or participate by going to tejoin.com and use the 9-digit access code, which is 256-188-716, to participate in this thought exchange. And so we are going to just kind of hold on this slide for a moment or two while you go into this. We do look at this data. It does matter to us. And we also are just very interested in the thoughts that are arising that were outside of the Q&A. So once you've shared your thoughts, please also start to rate some of the thoughts of others. And thank you. As you're doing that, there are connections that are being made. And so when we're finished with our thought exchange, Dr. Van de Kamp will show you what some of the thinking is and the connections that were made. So we'll hold on this slide for about 2 more minutes. All right, Dr. Van de Kamp, why don't you switch over? Thank you. So it looks like we're up to about 165 participants sharing 61 thoughts, and we've had over 367 ratings. Thank you. Dr. Van de Kamp, are we able to show the connections or do we need to wait till it closes?
We can go ahead and I can move to the next slide and it'll start to show the connections. Here you can see them and you can see the top thoughts.
Thank you. So we can see that at the very core, it kind of looks like a spider web. Those are the thoughts that people are connecting. And the longer you stay on this, the more opportunity you have to submit thoughts and also to rate thoughts. So we see that we have rising to the very top that parents would be made clear of the minutes and the expectations. Yes, we realize that, and we will absolutely do our part to address that. Mental health and bereavement. Talking about if parents are sick or students, they die, or staff. It's too soon, concerns, overwhelmed and under-supported thinking about coming back to school. All right. Thank you all for sharing. Take another minute just to scroll through it, and then Dr. Haglin, I'll turn it over to you to go ahead and close us out.
Pam, this will stay open for how long?
We can leave it open until tomorrow or Wednesday.
That sounds good to me.
All right.
So
Great.
thank you everybody for the logging on today and for being willing to participate both in the Q&A but also in the thought exchange. Thanks to the team here for putting this together and the information together for you. Staff, please continue to send us emails related to things that you're thinking about or concerned about. We do read those, and we do appreciate you sharing your thinking. And please continue to share within the thought exchange as well. So thank you and have a great evening.